Oh, well, my name's Brandon. 37 years old. I'm an ex-retired single semester Division III athlete. I wrestled and brief stint in college. I was a three-time county champion in high school. I always liked training. I always trained more towards strength and performance. The bodybuilding aspect, the aesthetics portion was more or less just a byproduct of that. Kind of what kept me going. The other reason I really wanted to start lifting weights is I was tired of getting my ass beat as being a skinny kid in wrestling. So later on in life, I was lifting and I was just kind of thinking, why am I doing all this for? I kind of want to put this to the test. And I've been a lifelong MMA fan, and I had a little bit of jujitsu training, when I was in the Air Force and when I was in law enforcement. My academy director was actually in the Jiu-Jitsu Hall of Fame. So every day was kind of like a little bit of a jiu-jitsu lesson. So I kind of just wanted to build upon that. And I found myself later on at getting a medical retirement from the police department. And now I work for Snap On. I have a little more free time. So I decided I was just going to kind of dedicate myself to doing jujitsu as much as I could. And unfortunately, about 3 months into training, I tore my distal bicep tendon in my left arm, and I was kind of lost. I was depressed, and I had goals in mind, and I figured I didn't really want to. I was so stressed out, I didn't want to think about doing managing any of that myself, managing my own training, my basically my entire life. That was something I'd never navigated before, so I figured I was going to try to get some help in that, and I figured I was just going to give you a shot.
Well, thank you again for that. But you've got, the military background, like you said, law enforcement, wrestling, powerlifting, jujitsu. How big of a part of your identity is being physically capable?
Pretty much all of it, to be honest with you. It's been a large part of my identity, being in law enforcement, being in the military, that took up, about 12 years of my life. So being physically fit, I feel like is something that, especially in the law enforcement aspect, is kind of neglected amongst a lot of officers. And I prided myself always as being physically fit because, in law enforcement, the very first weapon you have is your officer presence. And I don't want to be some fat blob or some little string bean showing up with a meth head, that I can't intimidate. The one thing I want to let them know is I'm not here to fuck around. I'm in charge, and nothing says that like a commanding physical body presence. Having a physique
Absolutely.
is a presence that people see that and they automatically, all right. I mean, people always want to have this trope, you used to have big muscles, you can't fight. But everybody knows that when they see somebody with that physique, at the very least, they work hard, and they have discipline, which is above 99% of other people out there. So it's always just been something that I've maintained, not just for the law enforcement aspect, but just for my own sanity, really.
And take me back to the injury. What happened? What was the initial prognosis? What did it look like?
Well, I was training with a young kid doing boxing. He was holding pads for him, and I don't know shit about that. Shouldn't have even done it. And he went for an uppercut, and I didn't pop back into it. And I hyperextended my arm, hurt my elbow real bad. But I'm kind of old, kind of ignored it. Didn't think it was anything of a big deal. And about a month later, I just posted on it, and I felt it tear and pop out, and that was that. So I went to the ER, did everything, got an MRI done. They said it was a full and complete distal bicep tendon tear on my left arm with about 2.5 inches of retraction.
So that was a good one. And that was right after you came to me, I believe, too. It was about a week, not even. We had just started.
Well, I
So
had
for
aspirations to compete in January. It was around, I believe, it was around like the September timeframe, like the end of September timeframe is when I contacted you about helping me with my conditioning. I hate conditioning. I hate running. Despise it with every ounce of my being. And I was like, I can't force myself to do this. As much as I hate to admit it, I cannot force myself to do this. I'd rather just ask for some help with it. And I figured with my age and everything else, I was like, I want to go into this being prepared because I don't like to lose. And
and
if
we
I'm
didn't
going
do
to
we didn't
lose,
do any running either, huh? We didn't
no,
have to
no,
do
no
any
running,
running.
no running, no running.
But
So
for someone with your background with the military, law enforcement, the wrestling, BJJ, all that, how did that affect you mentally when you had that injury, especially considering you were coming into, prep for a competition? Yeah, how did that affect you?
I mean, it affected me pretty bad. I fell into like a pretty deep depression there for a little bit. But just having like a structured plan and a path. I mean, I'm pretty resistant to change, not gonna lie. But the more I just kind of just trusted the process and put my foot forward, it helped me propel. Especially with like the conditioning aspect of it. That was my main worry. I mean, gaining strength back, that's I can handle that. What was really discouraging, when I first started rolling, I was puking after every class for a couple weeks, in the middle of class, just because I was so out of shape, and it's not cool to be the Hulk for about 30 seconds. So I was really worried about that. And that's what was really taking me down into a deep depression was like, I'm gonna be starting from square one all over again. And I didn't
Yeah,
want
and
to. I had worked hard to get to where I was, which I wasn't in the best shape before the injury, but I was getting there.
right, and then another speed bump that we ran into there is that the VA didn't cover your physical therapy. So what did that situation look like? I mean, what were your options at that point?
They didn't really give me any options. They just basically said, just do it on your own. They said the majority of the time that people just do this on their own. I was like, well, I don't really want to do this on my own. That's where you stepped in. And, I think the progress speaks for itself.
So, with that, what made you decide to start working with me specifically? Because you did come to me before the injury. That was just kind of something we had to handle. What did the first few weeks look like?
I mean, the first few weeks were just like basic, it was like, it was a lot of, it was more biking and just basic movements, single arm movements, and a lot of leg movements. I was still in the sling and in a soft cast. So there wasn't really a whole lot I could do, but it gave me a drive and something to work for. It gave me hope.
Yeah, and I mean, we started from, like you said, the sling, and then 2 pound curls, I think is, where we started as far as resistance. Yeah, and then we're all the way up to deadlifting, what, 405, 455, something like that?
Yeah, well, what was it? Last week I did 465 for 4 sets of 3. So yeah, I started out benching 3 pounds. I'm now benching 80s in both hands now. And that was starting the benching was on January 4th.
Yeah,
So
I
3 or
didn't
4
want you to
months.
start that quick at all, but there had to be moments early on where the training felt almost insultingly light for someone at your level. How did you manage that?
Well, I mean, I saw some little, like 18-year-old broccoli headed kids behind me laughing one day when I had a 3 pound dumbbell in one hand and my injured arm and a 70 pound dumbbell in the other arm. I was like, it ain't gonna be like this for long. So it just kind of just lit a fire underneath me to keep trying. And it was humbling. I've always been a strong guy, especially for my, I'm not an overly big guy. I'm 5'6" on a good day, at 175, 180 pounds, but I've always been stronger than most. Having when I got up to like a 7 pound dumbbell and having that struggle, I'm not one to shy away from a challenge. It was humbling, but at the same time, it was motivating. I was like, I'm gonna even this out. Like it's not gonna be like this forever.
And I mean, one of the biggest things that I hear from people, especially like high performers like yourself, is that they say, I don't need easy training. Obviously, that's not what we did. There's a difference between being easy on ourselves and being smart. So, when did you start to trust that the process and the progress was actually working?
I'd say probably within like a month and a half, I started to be like, okay, yeah, this is something. Cause, at first I was like, what is this? This is not what I'm above this. But then I kind of had to just take a look at the mirror and I was like, well, I'm half a man right now. I'm not above this. I just need to do what's here written and just trust the process. And I did. And I was better off for it.
Absolutely. And then, what did the actual coaching process look like week to week? What was it that kept the progress moving for you?
Just like the interaction, just seeing the weights go up every week or, as often as I could, just watching the numbers, being able to track the numbers on everything, I mean, typically I was, in my old programs that were basically just strength based. I was only really keeping track of like the main lifts, but keeping track of the accessory lifts and moving up periodically with the accessory lifts. I feel like that made a big difference. Not just keeping track of like the compound movements, keeping track of what I'm curling, what I'm doing for leg extensions, stuff like that. Having more of a solidified plan to progress with those, I feel is something that definitely was something I wasn't used to, but I think it was extremely beneficial overall.
And we've hit on the numbers a couple times, so let's talk a little bit about the specifics. Where did you start realistically? Like, what could you actually do, and where are you now? We talked about the 2-pound curls, but
Yeah. I mean, the direct arm curls is something that, I mean, due to the nature of the injury, is going to have like the least amount of progression. When we introduced the barbell bench, within the last like month or two, I started seeing massive gains in that, and I kind of shied away from the barbell bench a while ago, but it's kind of nice, to get like an old favorite in there and start going up, and and just be able to feel the stability come back, like not having like the seesaw effect, that and really doing dips, like when you program the assisted dips in there. I've never had issues with any sort of body weight movements in my life. And I was like, assisted dips, like, what the fuck is this? But when I was doing them, I was like, wow, this actually feels good. And to be able to watch myself go from, having body weight resistance on that to just going slowly, slowly up. And then eventually I was like, wow, I can do this unassisted. I realized that I was able to do it unassisted way before I would have ever done it on my own. And the same goes for the pull-ups as well. Like adding the assisted pull-ups was after the dips. So I was like, okay, I feel like I can do these too now. And that's something I would never go away from. I always said, the best exercise you can do with an assisted dip machine is to drag that fucking thing right out of the gym. But in this case, it actually helped me. So I
and now
enjoyed it.
now you're doing weighted dips too. So you
Yeah,
went
yeah,
from
exactly. The progress from going from body weight to now weighted was another thing. I mean, and not to mention there's something to be said about that too, because I mean, dips was something that I enjoyed a lot in my youth, but I haven't been able to do them in years. It just because it always bothered my shoulder, but now I'm doing them weighted with zero shoulder pain. I don't know what that is, but I mean, it's something's been going right with the training because I could never ever do those without shoulder pain. Not even body weight would there'd be shoulder pain, and now I can do them body weight and weighted with no shoulder pain.
Hey, I will gladly take credit for that one. Another important number that I want to point out for you is that your heart rate dropped from a resting heart rate of over 70 beats per minute to now we're in the 55-ish range. So that in and of itself is huge. That tells me that your body's recovering very well. But was there a specific moment, a session, a lift, a roll on the mat where you knew you were back?
Yeah, I mean, my first week back to doing BJJ was about a month and a half ago. Besides the obvious, me being worried about my arm, I was obviously very worried about my gas tank. First session was not, well, it wasn't a training session that I was used to. I walked in there, I was expecting some instruction. They said, "Oh, we're doing 6 5-minute rounds today." And I was like, oh my God, here we go. I survived it barely. Didn't puke though. And that was something that would have made me puke beforehand, that when I had the 3 months of training doing that much. I mean, doing a 5-minute round would have killed me, but doing them back to back to back would have just been out of the question. That gave me confidence right there. I was like, okay, I'm tired, but I did it. I survived. And then I did a couple more training sessions. In the following week, same thing. We were doing, 2 to 3 5-minute rounds, and I was able to go and go and go and go and go. And I was like, wow. I was thinking to myself, I was like, this is something that I couldn't have done before. And I've had 6 months off, and now I can do it. And I'm competitive. I'm not dying. I'm not just sitting there gasping like a fish out of water on my back, just praying for it to be over. I can actually continue to roll and continue to be dangerous throughout the whole duration of the 5 minutes. And that's something that I never would have thought that coming off 6 months off that I'd be able to step back on and be able to just go and do 5 minutes of continuous rolling. I figured that would have been at least 2 3 month process.
Well, that's one of the things you said was that, your progress exceeded your expectations. So what did you expect going in versus, what you got coming out of it?
Well, I expected to be puking after every session, mid session. I expected to be weak. I didn't expect, I expected my strength to be way down. I mean, the numbers aren't what I would like to see, obviously, compared to 7 8 months ago. But also, the different focus on the training is something that I've accepted and I'm okay with. But everybody I've rolled with is like, I cannot tell that your left arm's injured. I cannot tell that. I can't tell that you had 6 months off you know. So I mean, I'm always my harshest critic. So to hear that from other people, they're not gonna lie to me. They're not gonna tell, they would be more than happy to tell me that I feel weak and that they could
Yeah,
boss me around.
especially your boys. They're
Yeah,
more than happy to tell you that you're a weak little bitch right now. But
Exactly. So I expected it, with all the conditioning we were doing, I really expected it to be at least a month, 2 months before I was back to the shape that I was in prior to being injured. But I would say it was within a week or two, I was back to where I was. And then the next week I was like, I just kind of dawned on me. I was like, man, I'm above what I was before. Especially when I start, when I have new kids come to class or people that I trained with prior, like I can tell that I'm keeping up with like the higher belts with their conditioning. The guys have been doing it for years nonstop. People that just started, I'm just doing circles around them. Whereas it wasn't like that before.
Well, and that's being back on the mat, being back to live rolling 3 days a week. What does that mean to you given, where we started?
Um, it's everything really because you know y- the gym wasn't totally out of the question because I could still do lower body, I could still work that one arm, but I couldn't roll at all. I could have got in there and tied my one arm down, but I'm way too competitive. I just told myself I wasn't going to do that. I was going to hold off. So be able to actually step on the mat and not only survive, but be competitive and continue to win after such a devastating injury and having time off because nothing gets you in shape like rolling does. Nothing at all. But the conditioning that you prescribed me definitely got my body acclimated to the workload and was able to help me adapt to that workload and continue to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Just be able to put the work in and be able to actually step in there and not die. I could actually focus on my technique and not just focus on not gassing out was huge. It far exceeded my expectations. I know, like I said, I thought it would be at least 2 to 3 months. I thought it would be at least 2 to 3 months where I'd be back into the shape that I was prior to the injury.
And we're even talking about stepping into competitions now. So whether it's, grappling or MMA, I think is still up in the air a little bit. But what does that represent for you relative to where you were 6 months ago?
Well, 6 months ago, I was really just more focused on the grappling aspect of it. Had goals of doing one in January, which would have had me of 6 months of training prior to that. It's more, I mean, it's a little less time than most people would, but I have quite the competitive history. I've competed wrestling at a high level. So this is kind of what I do. I want competition. I want to see how much better I am than somebody else. I want to see where I'm at. But with the shape that I'm in now, I don't think I need the 6 months for the conditioning aspect of it. I don't think I need that at all. Especially if I have like a goal in mind, like if I have a competition in mind, something like that. I know that with your guidance and your training, that especially if I'm already in shape, that it's just going to be to the next level. I'll be able to perform to the highest of my ability.
Absolutely. And last thing, if someone is watching this right now, they've just had surgery, they're sitting at home, they're feeling like they've lost something or everything. What do you tell them? What words do you have for them?
Don't ever give up. You never give up. The only time you lose is if you give up. And there's one thing I learned a long time ago. You can't beat a man who refuses to lose. You can't beat anybody who refuses to lose. Even if it's just a little bit of progress, a little bit of time, as long as you just do what you have to do, as long as you're not rolling over and dying, you're making progress. Just little steps, small steps. It's hard for me. It was hard for me not to get ahead of myself. There's a few times for you to tell me to fucking reel it back in. And I didn't want to do it, but I did it and I was better and I'm better off for it. But I think the main thing is you just don't give up. You just got to keep trying. You just got to do whatever you can do and just trust the process, really.
Couldn't have said it better myself, man. Well, I appreciate you for this. I'm sure everyone else is going to appreciate your story as well. I look forward to doing this again with you in the fall, I think we're looking at, right?
Full time. Yep.
All right,
Yes.
perfect.